Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our webinar for parents. My name's Jodie Allen. I'm a clinical psychologist.
And my name's Leonie Rowland. I'm a trainee education mental health practitioner.
And we both work for a service called Me and My Mind. We're a mental health support team, and we're based in half of the schools in East Sussex. And one of our roles is about providing information to all the schools, even if we're not directly going into them. So we hope that this session is helpful for you. And if you want to find out more, we should have some information at the end of how you can do that. Okay, so we're talking today about sleep hygiene and healthy eating. The aims of the workshop today are to understand the interaction between sleep and mood, to learn about sleep hygiene and good sleep habits, and to learn some strategies about how we can support children and young people. We're also going to spend a little bit of time thinking about the interaction between food and mood, and again, try and learn some good eating habits and some strategies for supporting children and young people. So today we're going to look at, just in a bit more detail, what is sleep, why do we sleep, how much sleep do we need at different ages, why is sleep important, why can it be hard to sleep for some people, and then when we're getting on to sleep hygiene, we're going to be looking into lifestyle skills and practical skills. And then towards the end, we're thinking about healthy eating, and we're going to share some useful links and resources for you if you want to find out more.
So, what is sleep? Essentially, sleep is an extended bout of rest, which we usually experience on a daily basis, where we are unconscious, that is, unaware of what's going on around us. And this rest allows our brain, nerves and muscles to go into rest and recover. However, sleep isn't a time when nothing happens. It's an active period in which a lot of important processing, restoration and strengthening occurs. So why do we sleep? So firstly, we sleep to process memories, to help us to organise and store memories from the previous day. We also sleep to restore the body. It's important to replenish energy, grow muscles, heal tissue and synthesise our hormones. And of course to dream. Dreaming often gives us an insight into what's been going on in our minds during the day, and there are a lot of theories about why we dream, but there actually isn't an agreed consensus on why we dream.
So what do we need to know about sleep? First of all, we sleep in cycles, and I will go on to that on the next slide. Now, at any age, we should really be able to fall asleep in 30 minutes or less. That's obviously ideal, and we know that a lot of people struggle with that, so that's partly why we're doing this workshop. Wakefulness once asleep is under 30 minutes, and the amount of sleep we need changes with age, but that's not the only factor we need to hold in mind. So there's other things going on other than just how old we are. So what are these sleep cycles? We go through these cycles a number of times throughout the night, and each cycle lasts about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Now, within our bodies, we have what are called circadian rhythms. That's our sort of internal clock, and our body knows that it's roughly around 24 hours for a human. And this sort of dictates when we should be awake and when we should be asleep. And we also experience what we call sleep pressure. So that's the sort of build up of this need to sleep as, for example, it gets darker in the evening and our sleep clock, our body clock, is telling us that it's nearing a certain point in that 24-hour period. Then likewise, that sleep pressure gets less as we start to wake up, and our bodies are sort of telling us to wake up or stay awake during the day, depending on, again, where we are in that 24-hour cycle. Now, once we begin to fall asleep, there are lots of changes in our brain waves, and sort of how heavily we are asleep. in our bodies as well. So it starts off, we have around here stage 1, we are quite drowsy, it lasts for about 5 to 10 minutes, but we're still kind of could be very easily woken in this time, so we're not fully unconscious at this stage. Then in stage 2 we get into light sleep, and again that lasts about 20 minutes or so. Still quite light, but we're not aware of our surroundings anymore. Then we go into stage 3, which is moderate sleep, and that can last a variation of time. And then we move into stage 4, which is deep sleep. Now, stage 3 is more of a sort of transition stage into stage 4. And stage 4, this deep sleep, that's when our bodies do a lot of their healing, their physical healing, and we are sort of fully unconscious, very much not aware of our surroundings. It's quite hard to wake someone up from this stage of sleep. And that's because our bodies are so heavily sort of focused on resting and repairing themselves. And then we come out of stage 4 and we go into stage 5, which is also called REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. And this is where if you watch someone sleep and you might see their eyelids move, well, their eyes moving underneath their eyelids, that's when they're in REM sleep. And that's the stage when we process more of our memories and our emotions from during the day. It's also usually the time when if you wake up during that time, you will remember your dreams, or you'll be more likely to remember your dreams. And that's why they can always seem a bit strange sometimes, because we're processing all of our random thoughts and memories very quickly, and our brains are trying to sort of make sense of them somehow. Then we go back into stage 1. And it can be or stage 2, quite light sleep, and we then go back into this cycle again, and we'll do that a few times throughout the night. Now, the amount of time that you spend in each of these stages, like we said, it's different for each stage, but it also depends on where you are in your development. So, for example, children have a higher proportion of deep sleep, perhaps because they're doing so much growing and that physical need is more. And then adults tend to have less time in that deep sleep, and that goes down more and more as you get older as well. Now, for young people, it's even harder to get up in the morning than it is for adults, particularly for teenagers. And that's because they're in their rhythm. There can be a dip, meaning that they're going to feel really tired. And that can be made worse by the fact that school days can start very early. So it's just something to be aware of. Those sort of feelings of tiredness are going to be even worse if they haven't had enough sleep. And often we think, teenagers, they're so lazy, they're always sleeping, but actually they do need a lot of sleep, and their bodies are kind of working against them in a way, and our expectations of them, because they are more likely to feel that deeper need to sleep later in the morning than adults are. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
So why is sleep so important? We have touched on some areas of this, but as we've seen, it's important for both physical and mental well-being. Healthy sleep is critical for everyone, and since we all need to retain information and learn skills to thrive in life, but young people especially acquire language, social and motor skills at a breathtaking pace, and so it's critical that they have adequate amounts of sleep in order to do all this important developing. So the occasional night without sleep will make you feel tired the next day, but it won't affect your health. However, after several sleepless nights, you might start to find that you feel tired all the time, drop off during the day, find it difficult to concentrate and hard to make decisions, and you start to feel low in mood and start to worry about not being able to sleep. Next slide. So how much sleep do we actually need? So we've seen that sleep plays a central role in our learning, behaviour, emotional regulation, and how we interact with others. Simply put, it plays a vital role in our ability to interact and cope with the world around us. So sleep cycles develop as we age. So primary age children under 9 years need about 10 to 12 hours sleep per night. And as you can see here, secondary age need 8 to 9 hours sleep per night, and young adults less, 7 to 9 hours per night. So that this means that young people generally need more sleep than adults at around 9 hours a night compared to the 7 or 8 required by adults. It's important to emphasize that everybody is different and some people need more sleep than others, and these are just guidelines.
Okay, so as we were saying earlier, although we know obviously sleep's really important, it's not always easy to sleep. There can be lots of different reasons for this, such as the environment around us. So, the bedroom might be too noisy or too messy, too hot or too cold. The bed might be uncomfortable or too small. Maybe the person doesn't have a regular sleep routine, and that's going to get in the way of their 24-hour sleep cycle that we spoke about earlier. Maybe they're not getting enough exercise. That can mean that they're not burning very much energy during the day, and therefore their body doesn't feel like it needs as much sleep to replenish that energy. They might be eating too late and finding it hard to get off to sleep because their body's focusing on digesting food instead of going to sleep. Or they go to bed hungry, in which case they might be more likely to wake up early because their body is signaling to them, you need to wake up, you need to get some food in you. Also, caffeine can have a huge impact on our ability to get to sleep. So it's in things like tea, coffee, chocolate sometimes has caffeine in. Also, you have to be careful about certain painkillers. If you have things like something with an extra, like in the title of the painkiller, it's usually because they've added caffeine. So just be aware of that, particularly if people are ill with colds or something. Are we giving them medication that has caffeine in? It's going to stop them being able to sleep as well. And caffeine can stay in our bodies for a really long time, at least 4 or 5 hours after you've drunk it. So you can be feeling the effects of caffeine and it can be stopping you sleeping long after you've actually had some caffeine go into your system. And then also, of course, if we're ill, if we're in pain, if we've got a high temperature, those can also cause a lot of trouble sleeping. Then we've also got the more sort of emotional or mental health side that can cause difficulties with sleeping. Emotional difficulties, anxiety and worry, depression, low mood, thinking over and over about problems, usually without actually solving any of those problems, just sort of mulling them over and over in our minds. Physical problems like illness or disability, and medications that affect sleep. So not just those over-the-counter medications, but some people might be taking prescribed medication that can also have a side effect of making sleep more difficult. When it comes to like anxiety and worry, for example, people might be worrying about things that happened during the day, going over things they said to people and thinking that they shouldn't have said that, or trying to think about what they should have said, for example. Or low mood, you might be thinking about things from the past that are getting you down. Or you might be worrying about the next day, something you've got on, something stressful in your life. So there can be lots of reasons why our brains might be staying more awake to be thinking about all of these things. And that's all going to make it much harder for us to kind of start to relax and switch off so that our bodies feel ready to go to sleep.
Yes, so sleep problems can be both a symptom of and a contributing factor to mental health difficulties. So if we're noticing changes in sleeping patterns, then that can be a useful time for us to step back and wonder about what else might be going on. So also, treatment for sleep difficulties can help improve mental health. So there is some evidence that treating sleep problems may help reduce depression symptoms in the general population, suggesting it may be an avenue for preventative mental health care. So young people's routines, including school schedules, may affect the amount of sleep they get, which has implications, as we can see, for their mental health. So difficulties with sleep can show itself in different ways, most of which I imagine that you're all familiar with. They can include problems falling asleep, regular night waking, that may include nightmares or poor quality sleep, early morning waking, and generally just less energy to cope with other emotional demands, and reduced performance during the daytime, physical problems, and overthinking or rumination. So if your child is having trouble with sleep, they're not alone. It's not easy. So looking at some studies, depending on which study you look at, approximately 50% of children and young people have regular difficulties with getting enough sleep. And because worrying about sleep can make things worse, it's important we let children and young people know that there is unlikely to be anything seriously or unusually wrong with them, and that difficulties with sleep are in fact very common. We need to tell children and young people that learning to get enough sleep is like learning to manage our physical fitness or learning to read or any other tricky area of life.
So something that some of you might be familiar with is bedtime avoidance. Often bed is avoided because the child or young person has made an association between bed and a place to worry or think too much. We might notice it in children who start to become a bit more difficult with their behaviour as bed approaches, or who keep getting up to go to the toilet or asking for a drink, or maybe they want another story before the parent leaves them alone in their room, or maybe they are falling asleep but then waking up throughout the night. Now, obviously, some of those things are basic needs. Maybe they genuinely do need a drink or need to go to the toilet, but I'm sure we're all aware that sometimes that we can start to tell the difference of when this is becoming a way of avoiding being alone at bedtime instead. So you just need to be cautious around that. Now, for some younger children, sleeping alone can actually be very scary. And when parents talk about going to bed, the child starts to become anxious just thinking about it. And as we can probably guess, anxiety doesn't help with sleep. When we become anxious, we start to produce two key hormones in our body. The first one's adrenaline and the other one is cortisol. Both of these help us prepare for danger. That's why if we start to feel anxious about something scary, our bodies think there might be some danger around, so they go into this survival mode with the adrenaline and the cortisol. And that's great if there is real danger around. That's going to help us to survive. It's going to keep us alert. It's going to make us stronger so that we can fight that danger or run away from it. But if the danger is just going to sleep and our signals have got a bit crossed, then those hormones are actually going to be really unhelpful for us because they're going to stop us from relaxing. They're going to make us too awake, too high alert, and we're going to have trouble kind of getting to sleep. So, we might also notice our heart beating faster, breathing faster, feeling a bit shaky in our limbs, for example, and that's a really normal, natural response of the human body to anxiety, but it's really unhelpful for sleep. So maybe have a think to yourselves. You might want to pause the video briefly and have a think about some of these questions. And, what do you think might help your child to feel less anxious at bedtime?
So let's have a look in more detail at these problematic thoughts. Lots of children and young people experience these thoughts before bedtime. Especially as the distractions of the day are removed, they may feel anxious and have unhelpful thoughts in their head. And this kind of leads to them ruminating or worrying about these thoughts. And it's helpful to understand that worrying is actually an internal behaviour, meaning that it's something that we do and therefore we have control over. The cycle that you can see demonstrates how worrying can become a stuck behaviour for young people, and it's because of the reinforcing consequences they receive. So if a child spends a long time worrying about a thought, they may feel more in control. However, worrying about a situation doesn't fix it. So the next time they're feeling anxious, they will worry again, which keeps this cycle stuck. So sometimes parents can play a role in maintaining this worrying behaviour. So if, for example, their child seeks reassurance and support from them or avoids going to bed, parents can inadvertently reinforce this behaviour. So although comfort and affection may improve the situation in the short term, this can actually keep the cycle stuck in the long term. So perhaps keeping a sleep diary can help parents and young people identify any stuck behaviours around this. And keeping a worry diary can also help to identify if a child is worrying a lot at bedtime. So therefore, if these unhelpful patterns are identified, it's important that young people are supported in separating worries from bedtime. This may be through establishing a worry time where children can express their worries, which is separate, and they can disengage in this cycle of worrying about problematic thoughts at bedtime. So we'll cover this idea of worry time and some strategies for supporting good sleep later on in this webinar.
So with sleep hygiene, the thing to think is bed. So BED. We're going to think about before bed, the environment, and also the daytime routine. So, for example, we want to make sure that we are doing a variety of different practices and habits that are necessary to have a good nighttime sleep quality and full daytime alertness. And so we're thinking about all these different times of day. They're all really important for sleep. So first of all, you want to try and make sure that your child uses their bed only for sleep. So if possible, we want to try and encourage them to, maybe having a pre-bedtime ritual like reading a book could be in bed, but most of the rest of the time, we're not using our bed for, sitting, doing homework or chatting on the phone to friends. It's just the bed and the bedtime routine. Also, we wouldn't necessarily recommend using your child's bedroom if you're doing time out for behaviour management, because they might learn to associate their bed with punishment, and then it's not a calm, relaxing area. We also want to ensure their bedroom is comfortable. So, most kids sleep best in a slightly cooler room. And if there's noise from outside, it can help to use white noise like a fan or a sound machine, because that can help mask it. Also trying to make sure that your child's bed isn't overloaded with toys, as that can be a bit distracting and also can get a bit uncomfortable if they want to move around a bit. Now, this one, my next tip might be a bit tricky for some people, but it's really important and can make a really big difference. We want to try and keep the same sleep schedule even at the weekend. What this does is it makes it much easier for your child and yourself to fall asleep at the same time naturally and wake up more naturally at the same time as well. And, ideally, particularly, if you're thinking about teenagers who are a bit more in control of going to bed and when they wake up, we don't really want them sleeping more than an hour past their usual wake up time at the weekend. If they do, that might indicate that they're not getting enough sleep during the week, and therefore their body's trying to catch up with it. But the more sleep you get in the morning, the less you're going to be able to sleep that following night, so it can really kind of mess around with our sleeping pattern. Whereas if we're able to have a regular bedtime and a regular waking up time, and we work out how many hours we need for ourselves, that can really, really help with our natural body rhythms of feeling tired and going to sleep at the same time, and then naturally feeling more alert and waking up at the time that we want to. We mentioned earlier about being hungry or eating too much before bed. Ideally, you don't want your child going to bed either too hungry or too full. So a light snack, warm milk and a banana is a good one, because it has something like potassium in that works well with feeling sleepy. Something light like that before bed can be a good idea, but heavy meals within an hour or two of bedtime you might find that keeps children awake. You also want to encourage an active lifestyle. So here we're getting more into this daytime routine point. Regular exercise prevents restlessness at night. About an hour every day is the recommended amount. But just to confuse things, you don't want to be doing really vigorous exercise too soon before bed, because again, it's going to just kind of wake the body up a bit too much. So ideally, you want to be doing regular exercise, getting your heart rate up sometime during the day, preferably every day, and it's a really good way of burning off some energy. It also helps with getting rid of stress and anxiety, boosting some happy hormones, and that's all going to help with when you then come to bed, you're going to be feeling calmer, happier, and more tired as well. So it's really, really helpful thing if you can manage that. We also want to ideally try and encourage natural light exposure first thing in the morning. So opening the blinds, it can help your child kind of feel more awake, and it helps signal to the brain that it's daytime now and we need to wake up a bit. You can even get special lamps that gradually turn the light up just before the alarm goes off, and things like that can be really helpful for getting our brains and our bodies in sync with when we want to wake up and how much light there is outside. So even in the winter, when we've got much darker nights and darker mornings, we can use things like light levels to try and kind of counteract those darker times outside. The other thing that we need to be aware of is paying attention to napping. So particularly like younger children, they need at least 4 hours between sleep periods before they're tired enough to doze off again. So although nap needs might vary, you want to try and make sure that your child isn't asleep for too long or too close to their bedtime if they are having a nap. So for example, it might be okay to have like an early afternoon nap if they need it, if they're a younger one, but we wouldn't want that going into, still being asleep at say 6 p.m. if you want their bedtime to be 7 p.m. because they're going to really struggle to feel sleepy again that soon after a nap. Now, young people in particular who sleep during the day or after school or during the afternoon on the weekend will usually have more trouble getting to sleep at night than those who don't do that. It's because they don't have enough of what we call sleep debt built up during the day by the time they get to the night time so that they can sleep. And then they're going to need to stay awake much later before they do feel tired. And then they're going to have trouble getting up in the morning. So it's a real kind of vicious cycle. So it's important, particularly with teenagers, that we help them become more aware of this sleep debt. You want to be making sure that during the day you're doing plenty of things that are going to help you feel more tired at the correct time of the day, so in the evening. And doing things like exercise can increase your sleep debt, so that's a good thing. But doing things like having a nap is going to decrease your sleep debt and make it less likely that you're going to feel tired enough to go to sleep. Similarly, lions. So we've said this before about our routine. you know, the later we lie in the morning, the less of a sleep debt we're going to have by the time we get to bedtime the next evening. So it's very tricky, because obviously if you've got a child who is struggling to get to sleep the night before, it's going to be very tempting to let them lie in so that they feel more awake and they have more energy. But it can, again, it's a bit of a vicious circle. So ideally we want to make sure that they're still waking up at an early-ish time in the morning, and not trying to catch up on that sleep, because then that will make it easier for them to go to bed at a normal time in the evening. And then that's going to kind of have a much better outcome in the long term with our regular bedtime routine and our cycles. Okay, so it's also important for us to tell young people, once they get up, that they need to be resetting their body clock so that their body knows it's daytime straight away. So for example, you can do that by turning on some bright lights, waking up, having breakfast, maybe doing some light exercise. It's really helpful because it means that your body is waking up straight away and, you know, not getting confused about whether we're half asleep or not. The other thing that is important is to spend quality time together. A lot of children want to stay up later because they're craving more time with their family, with their parents. And, you know, if both parents are working during the day or working late into the evenings, then, you know, children might be tempted to try and stay awake so that they're spending a bit more time with their parents. So, you know, if you can spend a bit more quality time before it's bedtime, you know, asking about their day, asking about their interests, you know, and even with like really young children, so babies, you know, singing to them, making eye contact, interacting in a kind of gentle way. It's a really good way of kind of giving them that attention that they need, but at a time that's going to kind of not get in the way of them trying to get to sleep.
So technology plays a huge part in all of our lives, but sadly it is not a friend of sleep. So we have to set limits with electronics. The blue light emitted by the TV, phones, tablets and video games can actually disrupt the body's sleep and wake cycle and makes it more difficult to sleep. So we advise turning off these devices at least 1 hour before bed and storing them outside your child's bedroom during sleep hours, as that's crucial to helping them get to sleep. And in fact, there are now several years of studies which show that there is an association between electronic device use and sleep quality and quantity. So some preliminary studies have shown that even a quick look at our devices in the middle of the night can interfere with not only getting back to sleep, but getting enough slow wave or deep sleep. So this is why it's a good idea not to even have them in the room. So explaining these experiments to children and young people and telling them about sleep hormones will increase their understanding about family rules and switch off times. I mean, it's a good idea to give your children an explanation for this. Of course, most young people are not motivated by themselves to turn off these highly pleasurable and fun social media and gaming devices. But if they know the research behind it, it can reduce the arguments that you may be having when parents are putting rules in places. We also need to allow ourselves time to process the experiences of the day and understand them before we go to sleep, rather than worrying about them all night long. So this setting limits with electronics will enable us to do this in a better way. So some people, including children and young people, need ideas of how to get to sleep. Everybody's different, so what works for one person won't necessarily work for another. So the next couple of slides, we're going to give you a few different ideas in the hope that some of these will be helpful. And as you can see, we'll be looking at visualizations, breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, worry time and problem solving, as we mentioned earlier, and saying positive thoughts out loud. But it's important to remind our children and young people to be patient with themselves as they learn these getting to sleep skills. They rarely work overnight and usually require repetition and practice.
Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about is visualization. Now, it might sound simple, but some people, this is young people and adults, don't know what to put in their heads when they're trying to get to sleep. So teaching them to, say calm thoughts to themselves, or to use their imagination to visualize something more relaxing can really help. So, for example, they might try sort of taking themselves through their favorite story. So it could be a book that they've read or a film. And if their mind wanders off, then the idea is to kind of go back to where they were in the story and keep returning to the story, as much as their mind wanders. That's, minds do wander, but the idea is that they keep bringing themselves back to that story, and that's going to be a really nice sort of enjoyable visualization for them. Similarly, they can visualize or imagine themselves walking through a place which they love, or a place where they feel safe. It could be like a familiar house, or somewhere in nature, or just imagining somewhere not necessarily that they've ever been to. It could be like a beautiful mountain or a beautiful desert island or something. Similarly, they can really use their imagination here, and it doesn't even need to be realistic as long as it's relaxing. So when I've done this with people before, someone I worked with wanted to visualize that they were on a giant purple cloud and everything around them was purple, and that was really calming and relaxing for them, and it really helped. They can really use their imagination as long as it's something that's calm, soothing, and relatively enjoyable for them. And it's just going to really help them sort of fill their mind with something that's helpful for sleep. The other thing we can do is breathing exercises. There's lots of different types of breathing exercises, so you can try the different ones out. They all sort of have the same outcome, which is to slow down our breathing, and slowing down our breathing then slows down our heart rate, and this helps our bodies prepare for sleep because it makes sure that we're not sort of overstimulated, and it helps to counteract the adrenaline and the cortisol that I was talking about earlier, which increases our heart rate. So if we can purposely slow down our breathing, it ends up slowing down our heart rate, and it can slow down the production of those hormones as well, and actually increase more helpful hormones that actually help us feel sleepy. So square breathing is you sort of imagine that you're drawing a square in front of you in the air, and you don't need to necessarily draw it out with your finger when you're lying awake in bed, but you can sort of move your finger up as you breathe in for 4, then you hold your breath for 4, and you go along with your finger, then you breathe out for 4, and then you move your finger along again and hold your breath for 4 before you breathe in again. So you breathe in for 4, and it doesn't necessarily have to be 4 seconds, just kind of a slow count of 4. Then we hold our breath for 4, then we breathe out slowly for 4, and then we wait and hold our breath for 4 before we breathe in again for 4. And so the cycle carries on. The other one you can try is color breathing. And what this is, you imagine breathing in your favorite color, or a color which you find relaxing. And you just sort of visualize that beautiful color filling up your lungs. And then when you breathe out, you imagine that you're breathing out a really dull color, or a color that you don't like. So what it does, it sort of represents all of those troubling feelings or troubling thoughts that we're sort of bubbling up inside of us. And we're sort of breathing in a nice color and breathing out all of that stuff that we don't like so much. So the next one you can try is balloon breathing. And in this technique, you imagine that you've got a balloon in your tummy, which you're trying to fill up with air. So you imagine breathing low and slow deep down into your tummy. And obviously you're not actually breathing into your tummy or, you know, your digestive system, but it does get your kind of belly moving out. So you're breathing in so that you can imagine that balloon is being filled up. And then when the balloon is full, you imagine letting all the air out as you exhale, nice and slowly, until the balloon is empty. And then you repeat the cycle again. So this is we're not, you know, letting our balloons out really quickly. We're filling them up really slowly, calmly, nice and full. And then we're gradually, slowly letting that air out again. And we just repeat that. And these techniques can be really nice for children. They're, you know, quite easy to visualize. Even if you've got a child that, you know, is too young to know how to count to 4, then that might be when you use the color breathing, for example. But the whole point is that we're slowing down our breathing. We're focusing on our breathing as well, which means we're not focusing on other things. And it's going to really help us to relax in our bodies.
Another technique, which isn't so much focused on breathing, is called progressive muscle relaxation. And this again can reduce stress and tension, helping to sleep better. You may be familiar with this or not, but essentially you start by tensing up your toes as tightly as you can and then relaxing them. And then you move up onto your ankles, calves, etc., all the way up your body until you reach your head, remembering to do your fingers, hands, arms. And this technique enables you to get out of your head and into your body, and also to do something to physically relax your body and make it ready for sleep. And this is such a good way of releasing tension and stress before sleep. So moving on, we've spoken before about the role worry can play and how your child may be struggling to sleep due to this. It can be related to anxiety or depression, or it might be worrying about school, friends, or work. It can be awful to be lying awake at night stressed or anxious, but there is actually something we can do about this. So having a dedicated time to focusing on what your worries are, actually getting them out of your head and onto paper, helps to clear our minds and gives us a focus or a starting point for problem solving. So the children can try to problem solve any worries with someone if it helps. Talking things through with someone can relieve anxiety and help them to put things into a more realistic perspective. So often having 2 people working to come up with solutions also doubles the chances of you finding a solution.
And we sort of slightly mentioned this earlier, but the only thing we would say about worry time is that it can be best to do this not just before bed. So you want to try and do this maybe slightly earlier in the evening, so that we're not spending the time just before bed thinking all about our worries. But we get them out in enough time, and then we can start to properly relax. And like Leonie mentioned, we can try some problem solving. So problem solving is something some children might be able to do on their own or with someone. And the main thing is that we're thinking about a problem that we need to address, or, you know, the biggest worry that's stopping them from sleeping. And we try and think of as many solutions as we can, and then we will break those down into steps. So those solutions can be as kind of wild and ridiculous as we like at this stage. So it's sort of, you know, not dismissing any solution. You know, we're going to think about as many as we can, and then we're going to break them into steps and see sort of how realistic they are. And we're going to pick the solution that we think is actually most suitable for us. And then we are going to plan out what we need to do, what we need to bring with us, or who we need to bring with us, what might get in the way of that solution, and how we could plan around that. And then we can also even think about, you know, having a plan for if things don't work out how we hoped they would. And then we actually do the plan. So we try out the solution to our problem and see what happens. And then it's really helpful if we can spend some time with our children thinking about how did that go? Did it work? Is the problem solved? In which case, that's brilliant. We can, give ourselves a pat on the back and know that this technique has worked for us, which can be quite reassuring in the future. Or if it didn't work out so well, maybe thinking about why was that? Why didn't our original solution work? Are there any other solutions that we can try that we thought of? Are there any new solutions that we can think of now that we've given it a go? And then go through the cycle again. So then we plan for that instead. And it's just a really helpful way of breaking our problems down into more manageable chunks. Having a plan helps us to feel more secure. So even if we're, it's a couple of hours before bedtime and we're doing some problem solving and it's not something that we can solve immediately, just knowing that we've got a plan in place can really help to kind of relax us and help us to then feel more able to go to sleep that evening, even though the problem itself hasn't been solved yet. Okay.
Yes, our last suggestion is to try saying it out loud. So this is essentially a distraction technique. So because basically you can't overthink or ruminate and say something different out loud at the same time. So if you say positive or soothing statements out loud in order to override troubling thoughts, because we cannot think and speak different things at the same time, it can be very helpful. So you can experiment with this yourself by trying to say the alphabet in your head and count out loud from 1 to 10 at the same time. It's just not possible, you'll see. So this technique can be used in different ways. It can be used as a problem-solving technique by speaking out loud possible solutions to the thoughts in your head that may be keeping you awake. Or you could use it to say motivational phrases instead. Instead of thinking, I am not going to do well in my exams, you can say out loud, I've tried my best and I will do the best I can in my exams. All of these skills, again, as we've been seeing, they require practice and patience, and they don't work overnight. But we might need to encourage young people to be patient with themselves as they learn to develop all of these skills which we've mentioned to help themselves sleep. Okay, so over to you, Jodie, for the next.
Yeah, so we want to think about what else could be going on. Maybe we need to monitor our children's sleep patterns using sleep diaries. There's lots of those available online, or you can just do it at your own in a notebook. There's probably some apps out there that you can also use to monitor your child's sleep pattern, and it can just be helpful to review that with them as well, and just notice anything that any patterns that you're noticing. For example, or they always have trouble on a Friday, might give you a clue on what's going on a Friday, for example. It could be linked with other issues like low mood, depression, anxiety, in which case, we want to try and tackle that issue as well as the sleep. And that might be by seeking help from your GP or talking to someone at your school and linking in with, for example, a team like ours, if your school has one of those. Could be a hormone imbalance, either an actual, like a thyroid issue, or it might just be age-related changes in hormones, which we all go through puberty and beyond. Monthly cycles for women with their hormones can all really affect our bodies and our sleep. Children with on the autism spectrum, so autistic spectrum, children with ADHD or traits of these sort of neurodiversity might be more likely to struggle with their sleep because of the anxiety that those differences can cause them in their day-to-day life. It also might mean that certain things like, for example, having a routine is particularly important for certain children, and if we're not sticking to that routine, it might make it even harder for them to go to sleep because of that sort of anxiety that might cause them. Likewise with ADHD, for example, if someone is more distracted, they're having trouble paying attention to things, that could also disrupt their sleep just before bed, of course. Things like sleep apnea, so having trouble with breathing properly during the night can really affect the quality of the sleep that you're getting, and that's something that you would need to investigate with your doctor. And then we've also might want to be thinking about things like bedwetting. So if that's going on, for young children, it's relatively common, obviously, but when we're getting to children that are a bit older and they're still wetting the bed, it could be a sign that perhaps there's something going on with anxiety. We mentioned earlier about the hormones of adrenaline and cortisol, and they make our heart beat faster and things like that. Another side effect of those hormones is that they actually can stop us from being able to control our bladder as well, because our bodies are trying to focus their attention everywhere else instead of on our bladder. So when we're feeling anxious at night, it can mean that we're even more likely to wet the bed, because our bodies are sort of relaxing that part of us so that they can tense up the rest of us so that we can run away or fight that danger. Likewise, it could be something physical, like hormonal differences again, or something physically going on, for example, with urinary tract infections. So, if bedwetting is becoming quite a common occurrence, it's really worth, again, speaking to your GP and trying to investigate any physical causes. And GPs are usually really good as well at thinking about whether this could be anxiety, in which case they'll be able to refer you to the sort of relevant support services. And then just in this diagram as well, you can see, lots of other things that we might be thinking about could be influencing it. And these are all things that we've spoken about already. The environment around the child, the biological clock, caffeine, alcohol as well. We haven't spoken about alcohol so much because obviously we're focusing slightly more on younger children. But, when we're getting into like older teenagers, if they're drinking alcohol, not only is that, concerning for their bodies, but it can also have an effect on their sleep. And that can be something that we really need to try and get on track with. And similarly, if you're thinking about this for yourself as an adult, if you're having trouble with sleep, you might want to think about how alcohol consumption could be affecting your sleeping patterns as well, because it can have a bigger impact than we might think. And then we've also spoken about phone usage, digital media, social media, things like that. School starting time, it's not something that you're likely to be able to change, but it's good to think about. If children are starting school really early, do we want to try and make sure they're doing everything they can in the night before so that they can have as much sleep as possible in the morning before they have to wake up and go to school? Similarly, homework, other social activities, making sure we're trying not to do those like really late into the night just before bed, because that's going to stop us being able to switch off and relax for bedtime. So going forward, we've got some resources that we would really recommend. There's this great book, Helping Your Child with Sleep Problems, and a similar one in the same series, which is Helping Your Child with Fears and Worries. I think both of those are available on something called Books on Prescription. So you can speak to a mental health professional or a GP, and they should be able to give you a prescription for those books, and then you can access them for free from a local library. There's also usually school health services or school nurses, and they will want to know what you've tried for 6 months. So if you've been doing a sleep diary, that can really help. Or if you haven't, start now. Start noting down all the things you're trying and how long you've tried them for, and that will help that person to help you work out what's going on. And then we've got the mental health support teams, or MHSTs. That's our team. And like we said, we're in about half the schools in East Sussex. So if you want to check with a teacher at your school whether or not they have Me in My Mind, you can access our support. If not, then there may well be other mental health support services of some sort that are going into your child's school, and hopefully they might be able to offer you some support with their sleep as well.
Right, so for the last part of our presentation, we're going to be looking at how food can affect mood and thereby mental health. So it's not just our bodies which benefit from eating a healthy diet. A healthy diet also benefits our minds and, as I mentioned, our mental health. And certain food groups are known to affect your body and mood in specific ways. This is because the food we eat and how much we eat it has an impact on how efficiently our mind and body works. So, for example, refined carbohydrates, which are simple sugars found in fizzy drinks, fruit juices, jams or syrups, can cause your blood sugar to spike and then crash, causing adverse effects on your mood and your energy levels. We're not saying don't have them at all, but just try to have them in moderation. So some of the things we know about food and mood are that a balance of vitamins and nutrients are needed to keep the brain healthy. So a diet which is low in fruit and vegetables may contribute towards a range of mental health difficulties. And eating a variety of fruit and vegetables, so at least 5 portions a day, will provide a healthy balance of many of the nutrients needed. We also know that it's really important to stay hydrated. So not drinking enough water can make you feel tired, low in energy and unable to concentrate. So do make sure that your children are topping up with water. This is because the body is around 3/4 of water, and 2 litres, which is probably the equivalent of about 8 glasses, is needed every day to replace lost fluids, and even more on hot days or after exercising. And so drinking non-caffeinated drinks throughout the day will help keep the body hydrated. Then we have proteins such as tofu, eggs or poultry, that can slow the absorption of carbohydrates in your blood and increase dopamine levels, improving your mood. And you know, there are many other things. Food, for example, which contains vitamin D, folate and B12 can also improve mood and can be found in things like soya milk, broccoli, oatmeal, oranges and dark leafy greens. And omega-3 is also important for good mental health, and so a diet low in these omega-3 fatty acids may contribute towards a range of mental health problems. So eating lots of essential or polyunsaturated fats such as omega-3 is thought to have a positive effect on how well our brain cells function and communicate with each other and the rest of the body. And essential fats such as this omega-3 are not produced naturally by the body, so they can only be obtained through the food we eat or supplements. So eating lots of food such as oily fish, walnuts, linseed oil and spinach at least 3 times a week can provide a healthy source of these omega-3 fatty acids. We also know that there are good carbs, such as oats, beans, pears, peas and sprouts, and these slow down sugar absorption and increase serotonin, which can decrease mood swings. And it is also worth being aware that energy drinks can have a negative effect on mood. I think more has been heard about this recently. Increased caffeine consumption in children and young people results in increased blood pressure, possible sleep disturbances, headaches and stomach aches, and can in fact increase anxiety. So if you'd like any more information about eating healthily, the Eat Well guide shows how much of what we eat overall should come from each food group to achieve a healthy, balanced diet. So that there's a lot of information on this slide, so you won't be able to see it all now, but it can easily be found on the internet. And as mentioned, the name is the Eat Well guide, and that's produced by the NHS.
So there's also service that we can recommend if you want to know more about healthy eating for your child. It's done through the school health service. It's called Ready, Steady, Go. And it's a really fun 8-week program all about healthy lifestyles. It's primarily designed for children who have a BMI which is either equal to or over the 91st centile and below the 98th centile. And it's for children aged 4 to 11. And if you're not sure where your child's BMI falls within the normal range for their age, you can go on the NHS website. If you just Google NHS child BMI calculator, you can put in their height and their weight, and it will give you a rough idea of where their BMI puts them compared to other children of their age. So this program is for children that are in the sort of higher centiles for their age in terms of their BMI, and the sessions are designed for you to attend with your child, so a parent or carer and the child, so that you can all take part in lifestyle advice, fun physical activities, challenges, games. I think sometimes they do cooking, fun cooking activities and things. It's a really lovely way of getting children more excited about making healthy choices, and it's something that you can do as a family, and maybe learn something as parents as well. The other support that's out there is there's a service called Time to Talk. We're very lucky in East Sussex, we have IROC. So there's an IROC, I think, in New Haven, Eastbourne and Hastings, which is, they usually have walk-in services, or you can go on their website and book a slot. There's CAMS, which stands for Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, and that's for children who are really struggling with their mental health. They might have more complex difficulties, for example. Then there's us, Me and My Mind. We work with children with mild to moderate low mood and anxiety. If in doubt, you can contact SPOA. It stands for Single Point of Access, and SPOA is staffed with people from lots of different types of mental health services and social services, and so they're really well placed to talk to you about what you might need and what service might be able to help you best. You can Google SPOA East Sussex and it should come up, and they have a phone number and an online form as well.
So, as we've mentioned before, we are part of the service from East Sussex called Me and My Mind, and we can help support children with mild to moderate difficulties. And this usually means that the child wishes to have support, so it's essential that they're on board with this. And mild symptoms may mean that they're small, but are having a meaningful impact on their daily life. And moderate may mean there are multiple symptoms which are making their life much more difficult than usual. We are currently in 53 schools in East Sussex, and if we are working within a child, within the school where your child is, you can speak to your designated mental health support lead, and they can arrange a referral for us to help.
Just to mention, a severe mental health problem might be when a person has lots and lots of symptoms that are making their daily life extremely difficult, and they might need something from a more specialist service like CAMS. And so if you're not sure, you can speak to your GP or your child's teachers, and they will hopefully have a good idea of where to try and access that support, or go through SPOA, and again they will be able to advise you. here is some more information about different places you can access support for children and young people in East Sussex. So mentioned IROC, they have walk-in centres and also online support. There's also a service called eMotion online counselling for 12 to 18-year-olds. And they have something called Teen Talk. Young Minds, which is a charity for young people's mental health. The Single Point of Advice SPOA, which I mentioned earlier, which is for 0 to 19-year-olds, county-wide service. There's also Dragonflies, which is bereavement support for all ages, but I think particularly for children. Eggtooth is a service in Hastings, which can offer support through therapy, creative activities, different kinds of groups. There's the Young Minds text line, where you can text YM to 85258, and you can get someone to reply to you via text, so you don't even have, the young person doesn't even have to talk to someone on the phone if they don't like doing that. And there's also the Young Minds parent helpline, so if you're not sure, you can contact 0808 802 5544, and they will hopefully be able to give you some reassurance and some advice. There's also the Sussex Mental Health Line, which I will just try and get the phone number of now. They're available in East Sussex and I think West Sussex, and they can support you kind of 24 hours a day outside of office hours, and they are 0800 0309 500. That's 0800 0309 500, and that's with trained mental health professionals that are on the end of the phone. So that's the end of our slideshow. We hope you found it helpful. If you have any questions, you know, you can get in touch with me in my mind, or you know, try and do that through your school, or go back through the slides and have a look at the books and websites that we've recommended throughout. Otherwise, it's yeah, I hope it's been good, and we hope that you can take away some of these ideas and that they have an impact on yours and your children's lives for the better.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.